welcome to All That Jazz. I'm Viviám María López. He's been playing the guitar since the age of 10. Since then, my guest has made a name for himself. He's played alongside artists as diverse as Phil Collins, Gloria Estefan, Two Live Crew, Jaco Pastorio's Big Band, Olivia Newton-John, the Florida Philharmonic, and legendary trumpeters such as Dizzy Gillespie and Maynard Ferguson, among others. For over 10 years, he was the official guitar player for the Univision show Don Francisco Presenta, and in 2011, he was named by the Miami New Times Best Jazz Musician. My guest today is guitarist Lindsey Blair. Welcome, Lindsey.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you here. So you were born in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I had no choice in the matter first, but yeah, it was a you know, kind of working class town. It's basically known for having a 500-mile race mostly, but you know, West Montgomery and Freddie Hubbard are also from there, and some other also well-known jazz musicians, but not quite as big a name as those two. It had at one point in time a very vibrant jazz scene, like in the 1950s, early 1960s, and so that's basically where I started.
Now, at the age of 10, you picked up the guitar for the first time.
Yeah.
Were there other musicians in your family? I understand there were some artists coming back.
Well, I wasn't even aware. Like I was always told, you know, that's a hobby. You're going to have a career doing something else. So, that music stuff, that's good, you know, but it's a hobby for you. But I come to find out, my mom's side of the family, there were just people in the performing arts that went back really generations and generations. There was I even have like a distant relative that was an actor, comedian that was in the film Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles.
Yes.
Like, and then his father was like a vaudeville actor, and there's a video on YouTube of him talking about the family being this is in England, on the boards, which means on the stage for generations before that.
Oh,
so,
wow. Now, at age 13, you formed your own band, and you started already playing in the local scene?
Yeah. Everybody. It was just. It was the middle of the 1960s, and the Beatles came out, and all the kids in the neighborhood, all the guys went from playing baseball in the street and playing Army in the woods to playing Beatles, you know, with their brooms, and everybody got a guitar eventually, and just everybody got in a band. Wasn't unusual for an 11-year-old, 10-year-old kid to be in a band at that point.
But there were several bands that you were already playing back then. I think you got your first paid gig right around that age.
Yeah,
or so,
first
right?
time I ever got paid, it was like a backyard party, and I got enough money that we went to Dairy Queen, and I bought my own ice cream cone with my own money that I made playing music. So I was really psyched about that.
Now, which musicians do you consider your main influences? There probably are a lot, but any in particular?
That's really hard to say, but I like musicians that are that can draw from a lot of different areas. I really am interested in music of all kinds, and I have a wide palette of stuff that I listen to. So there's really no music I don't like, other than maybe polka music or something, you know. But who do I really influence me a lot? Guitar players that influenced me a lot were Wes did a lot, Jimi Hendrix did quite a lot. Some of the studio musicians were actually real big influences on me, like Cornell Dupree or Dean Parks or Steve Lukather, people like that, you know, because they're able to just fit into any situation and make something come to life, you know, regardless of whether it's part of what they're associated with, like their primary style. And I kind of emulated that path.
Right, that's what I've noticed with such diverse, you know, artists that you've played with. Now, what struck you about Westcombe Montgomery?
Well, like the first time I heard him, I was watching television, and he got really popular in the mid-1960s, about the time I started playing guitar, for playing the melody to pop songs. with octaves and with a lot of orchestration and a lot of lush production, which sounded like Muzak to me. You know, I mean, my ears were tuned into Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and James Brown and stuff like that. So it sounded, I didn't think it was cool, you know. So and then we got this record they used to have these things called a record club. And they would send you records in the mail, whether you asked for them or not.
And I don't
Like if you didn't order one that month, they're just sending you one. So we didn't order one that month, and a West Montgomery record came, and it was called Willow Weep for Me. It was a live record where he was really opening up and playing, and I put it on thinking, oh, this is going to be like one of those corny records, you know. And he played, the song was called Impressions, John Coltrane song, and he was playing things that I didn't even think were possible. You know, like he was playing a whole improvised solo with block chords.
It left an impression on you for sure.
It did. It's like I said, it was like I listened to that and I said, wow, there's actually a better guitar player than Jimi Hendrix. You know?
Now, after you graduated from high school, you came to Miami to live. What brought you to our city?
Well, I actually started college at Indiana University, and they only let me into school, I think, because they wanted to go to the dean and say, look, we have guitar students here, we need this guitar teacher. And then the administration didn't go for the guitar teacher. So I was like, they called me like in August to tell me that I wasn't, you know, there was no teacher for me in September. So I started looking around at schools to go check out, and there wasn't that many that was available at that time. There was Boston, Berkeley, there was Denton, Texas, which is North Texas State, University of Miami, there was Rochester, New York, Eastman, and you know, like, okay, Denton, Texas, no. Boston, maybe. You know, Rochester, New York, no. Miami sounds fun. So we flew down to Miami, and I auditioned for school. I remember we went in and auditioned for school, registered for classes, you know, turned in my application for school. They didn't know of me at all before I got there. And I got done in one day. I don't think that's even possible now. Like, I got accepted to school, I auditioned for the music school, I picked all my classes and paid all my tuition in a day.
Oof. Well, let's keep that thought. When we come back, we're going to talk more about that Miami scene during those years, and also how Lindsey wound up working for a Spanish television network on TV. So right after this, keep it locked, MiamiDade.
MiamiDade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Welcome back to All That Jazz. I'm still joined by guitarist Lindsey Blair. Lindsey, so let's talk about that Miami scene of those years.
This would be like the late 1970s. What was great about studying in Miami is I could go to school in the day and I'd have these great teachers that were, you know, showing me exactly what I wanted to learn about. There was plenty of time for me to practice. And then I could take the music and I could apply it, you know, because I would have a place to go work, because it was very, you know, easy town to find work in, because there was a lot of tourism, you know, and the music that we got to play, even on like typical nightclub gigs, for what they would call like the booty shaking gigs these days, was great music. I mean, these days that kind of music would be called jazz.
Mm-hmm.
It was Steely Dan, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder,
Nice.
Herbie Hancock Sextet, Gino Vanelli.
Oof, yeah.
These, you know, it's great music. I mean, that's really where I wanted to go, you know, with music. So it was perfect, and the players in town were fantastic. You know, who was I playing with? I was playing with Steve Rucker, who's the drum instructor at University of Miami. Played a lot with you know, like the guys in the Sound Machine were around. They had another band called The Company, and they were playing behind this great guitar player named Mike Gillis, who was an excellent jazz guitar player. And we would just set up in the club. Another thing that was great about it, you set up in the club, and you didn't have to move anything because you played there for 5 nights.
Oof.
You know, so you just came in, everything's already set up for you, ready to play on the second night you play. And the audience was packed, you know. It's like,
And playing 5 nights, that sounds like paradise too, right?
it was
you know,
great.
It's a different
I mean,
time.
it was perfect, perfect.
Great. And also during that time that you were at UM, also Bruce Hornsby, I think, was
Bruce
also
was one of the students. Steve Morse was there. Pat Metheny had just
Yes.
left. All those guys in the Sound Machine were studying there around that time. Ed Kaye was one of the students. You know, really, really great bunch of guys. Actually, I've sat down and I thought about, like, there was this class we had. It was called Jazz Guitar Theory, which it was the first year you're there. Like, they took all the guys that were just newbies, like beginning jazz guitar players, and put us all in this class. And there was myself. It was Randy Johnston was another one of the guitar players who was like a well-known jazz guitar
Yes.
player. Another guy was I think Jeff Lee Campbell, who's been like on Broadway and played with Sting. Another guy was, I forgot his name, he played with Bob Dylan and Shelby Lynne. And there was only like another guy, Andy Most, I think was in that class, and he is like a Nashville session guitarist. Like almost everybody in the class
Went on
became
to
like a
really-
world-class guitarist.
Super.
Out of about 10 guys, there's 6 of them I can think of that have big major careers.
Excellent. Now, after you graduated from UM, something really great happened as well. Like when you started touring with Maynard Ferguson.
Yeah, that was a big stroke of luck. The sax section in the Maynard's band was all Miami guys. I think it was Ed Mena, who just recently finally moved out of town, and I just played with him. He was back this week for another. I'm going to play with him tonight, matter of fact. Eric Traub is a guy that recommended me for the job, and then Jeff Kirk, who is, I believe, the dean at the Belmont University in Nashville, was one of the sax players, and they're all Miami guys. So that was my connection into that, and you know, Maynard he's just a beast.
Oh, I can only imagine playing with him and touring, of course. Now, after that, then you moved to LA, and
Yeah.
then things, you know, you started going to the soundtrack business or doing things for, you know, TV stations.
It's just the music business is a you just piecemeal things together as you can. So
Right.
I did all kinds of work, as I still do. You know, I mean,
Right.
there's really no particular. Say I just, you know, say I played for this person. Like when you do that, you're playing with that person and 10 other people, and then you're also teaching, and you're also doing recording sessions, and maybe you're producing something for somebody, or you're writing for something for somebody else. You know, so everything's, you know, it's always a mix of things. But when I was in Los Angeles, I did do some film work. I did a lot of teaching there, mostly.
Right, I was gonna ask
honestly. Well, you know, Los Angeles. That was with those teaching at the school I was teaching at was really one of the coolest things I think I did. Musicians Institute. It used to be called GIT,
Correct.
and they would give us, you know, hours where they would pay us to go in and just jam with people. And they called that open counseling. So
Open council. I like
during the open counseling, I might get to go play with like Ralph Humphreys or Jeff Berlin or Scott Henderson,
I
or these guys are just down the hall because they're teaching there too, and they got open counseling.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And well, and then I know that you did that, but in 2001 there was another change, because now we're gonna get ready to talk a little bit more about the work they did here in Miami with the show Don Francisco, which is a national TV. How did that happen?
It's just friends. I knew a lot of the guys, you know, from my first stint in Miami. Like the way things worked is I lived in Miami in the 70s. I moved out through the 80s, came back in the 90s. So a lot of these guys that I played with in the 70s, like Rafael Valencia, Mike Levine, Flaco Padron, Adolfo Lancha.
Yes.
They were all the band on Sábado Gigante, and they were starting this other TV show, which is going to be a talk show called Don Francisco Presenta.
Yes.
And Mike recommended me and I think two other guys, and the other two guys passed on it, and I was the guy. You know, I went in and auditioned, and in my Spanish is like nil. I'm just sad to say I'm just terrible with that.
So you didn't really learn
I didn't,
per se
no,
Spanish while you
I
were...
wasn't good in Spanish, but I remember Don Francisco Mario, he came in and he asked me something in Spanish, you know, and I just went, and he like dropped the microphone and he just walked away. And then he says, "You guys gonna take care of him?" And they all say, yeah, we'll take care of him. He says, "Okay."
And imagine playing and here, you know.
Oh, he'd make jokes about me. I wouldn't even know.
Oh, yeah. So hold that thought. When we come back, we're going to share more about some of the artists that he played with, in particular one very special, right after this.
MiamiDade College has career paths in anything you want to be. What's your story? Be global. Be cutting edge. Be inventive. Be investigative. Be a hero. What do you want to be? Be the best. Be you. Be MDC.
Thank you again for joining us in All That Jazz. With me on the set is my guest, jazz guitarist and composer, Lindsey Blair. So Lindsey, while you were at Don Francisco Presenta, you, I'm sure, accompanied many artists, but I know there's a few of them who were quite special. Can you share?
Well, I think the one you're asking me about is Celia Cruz. So this is this really touched me when it happened. She passed away not long after that, and she was pretty feeble, you know, so they had to help her out. There was like her husband came along with her, and she was kind of walking, I think, with a cane, and he had one arm, and then the other guy, there was another guy, studio guy, that just kind of helped her out, walked her out to the little podium, and the little podium isn't real tall, but it's maybe this big, and she had trouble getting her leg up just to get up there, and they got her up on the stage and over to the couch, and they did an interview with her, and so they did the interview segment with her, and her husband came and joined her. So the piano player that we had at the time was Valentin Trujillo, who was Don Francisco's right-hand man for forever. So he started playing some Montuna that was one of Celia's tunes, you know, and he was looked at her, because you think they got a relationship, they've known each other for years. He started playing it, he looked over at her, and she kind of got this spark in her eye, and she looks over, and she starts moving around in her seat, you know, and the band jumps in, everybody's playing. I don't know the song, but I'm just playing away, you know, trying to fit something in there. And she gets it, and the energy of the whole room just kind of lifted, and then she started moving around, and then she gets up and they give her a microphone. She starts singing, and the more the music is playing, you could see like energy just flowing into this woman, and she gets up and starts dancing around on the stage, and she goes over to the edge of the stage. She's like the orc in the audience. She jumps off the podium and starts running around in front of the audience, unassisted. I mean, it's like music just completely changed.
Gave her the life and just the energy.
It's unbelievable, you know. And when she got done, everybody was like stood up and was clapping, and they were having a hard time because this happened all when the cameras were not rolling. This is when we were on break between segments.
Wow,
you know?
look at that. Oh, how special though. Yeah, Celia is very much loved, and I'm sure there was a long lineup, but that's a quite special story. Now, coming to another year that was very special for you, I think, is 2011, that you were named by the Miami New Times as Best Jazz Musician.
Right.
Congratulations.
That was a big surprise to me. I had no clue. Matter of fact, I think the magazine had been out. They didn't call me or tell me that it was going to be, you know, I had been chosen or I was even in the running or there was such a contest or whatever. I'd seen it, you know, in the paper when other people that I knew had gotten it. But like I was playing some sort of a job and somebody comes up to me and like congratulates me on winning. I said, what did I win?
What did I win?
And I said, well, you're the best jazz musician. I said, who says that? They said, New Times says it. I said, what? No, you're joking, right? And I went and checked it out, and sure enough, and to me it's shocking because I was not even playing many jazz gigs at all. I think it was probably the Seven Crossing CD release. They must have seen that.
Because I know it coincided with the
it was
release
like right
of
at the same time the first Seven Crossing record came out. So I got to thank Clay Oswald for getting me my little magazine recognition.
Very good. And in fact, let's talk about Seven Crossing, that project that was released that same year, and the collaboration with Clay.
Yeah. So Clay, I got to know Clay through Gloria Estefan because he was one of the musical directors. The other one was George Casas.
Right.
And I actually knew George much better than I knew Clay because I remember when George got to town, and he used to play with Mike Gillis, which we talked about earlier.
Yes.
And Clay and he had, since I left town and to Los Angeles, had become big music, like record producers for Gloria and for other people as well. But George recommended me to get into the band, you know, for a tour with Gloria. And through that, I got to know Clay a lot better. I'd met him before, but we hadn't played much together. And we really kind of gelled and, you know, got together well. Musically, we fit I mean, he's perfect for the stuff that I do, and he likes what I do and his stuff, you know. So we were on the road, and Olben, the drummer, said, hey, we had to get together when we're not on the road and just play some tunes, you know, like go get some gigs and put a fusion band together. And I said, well, yeah, you know, I got a couple of songs that I've never even thought about playing with anybody, and we could just read those down and see how they go, which turned out to be the title track, Relentless.
Oh, excellent.
And then there was another song called We Can Get Through This, which they used in Jazz Is magazine as a sampler for the record.
There. Perfect. And then I know you have another album with Seven Crossing, and then you put together your quartet.
Right.
So that's excellent. And you have an album. You have a new album, right?
Got
Recently?
two albums, actually.
Or actually two albums,
yeah.
right? And you have a newer one?
Yeah, the new one is all West Montgomery music. That's probably the most successful one of, I think it's primarily I'm writing on West Montgomery's coattails, but I'll take it, you know, it's fine with me. But it did pretty well. It was shocking to me to look at the charts, the radio airplay charts called Jazz Week charts.
Yes.
And my record was like at number 19, and 18 I think was John Coltrane, and then 17 was Tony Bennett and Diana Krall.
Excellent.
Which is
Congrats.
Well, how did I get there?
Well, there's many good reasons for that. And talking about that and a little bit about the education as well, do you have any advice for young players or for those going into the music industry?
Well, I'd say first of all, just really know your craft. Just be very good, because you have to be at the top of the game to really even make a living anymore. So it's very competitive. You can do it. I mean, there's work there for you. You also have to be a good person and good with people. Be responsible. You have to, have an attitude of gratitude for getting an opportunity to do what you're doing.
Yes.
And there's really no place for people that are kind of rude, irresponsible, show up late, don't pay attention to the details, don't show up knowing what they're supposed to know for the job. Be a pro, I'll say that.
I like that. I like that very much. Well, with that great advice and with all these great albums, including this latest one, congratulations for that. All the very, very best to you, Lindsey.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the last few moments of this edition of All That Jazz. Until next time, when we bring you All That Is Jazz, I'm Viviám María López, wishing you a very jazzy day.